Millionaire left his secret phone on Thanksgiving. His pregnant wife sold the family farm before his loan could close. Grant Whitmore believed the old farmhouse was valuable because a bank would lend $18 million against it. His wife believed it was valuable because 4 generations of her family had learned how to begin again there. On Thanksgiving morning, Grant left his secret phone beside the coffee pot and flew to Chicago with another woman. What Eleanor found did not merely prove an affair. It revealed a forged trustee resolution, a false medical capacity letter, and a plan to take control of her unborn daughter's inheritance before the baby drew her first breath. Stay with this story until the final Thanksgiving bell, because Eleanor did not defeat a powerful man with a dramatic act of revenge. She defeated him with records, witnesses, and the patience to let the truth survive examination. Subscribe to the channel for more stories of courage and second chances, and tell us below which matters more, the family name on a property or the purpose the property serves. Our story begins when Grant returned to Pennsylvania and found a new sign at the end of the farm road. Bennett House, a resource center for families rebuilding after financial abuse. Grant Whitmore slowed his black SUV until the tires stopped on the gravel. Snow lay across the dormant orchard and the low stone walls built by Eleanor's great-grandfather. The historic farmhouse stood at the top of the hill, its white clapboards bright against a steel-colored sky. A closing crew was replacing the old mailbox. A county deputy waited beside a property attorney. Near the barn, movers loaded numbered containers into a truck marked secure storage. Grant lowered the window. Who authorized that sign? The property attorney stepped closer but remained outside the vehicle. The Bennett Preservation Trust transferred the property to Heritage Path Foundation this afternoon. The deed has been recorded. Your counsel received the civil protection order, the trust court order, and the inventory instructions. Grant opened the door and climbed out. My wife cannot sell my home while I am traveling. The farm was never titled in your name, the attorney said. Mrs. Whitmore was the acting trustee. The trust court confirmed her authority to accept the foundation's offer, and the family court granted her temporary exclusive possession based on the evidence presented. Your separate property has been inventoried for pickup. Grant looked toward the front porch. The brass key in his hand had opened that door for 9 years. He walked past the attorney and inserted it into the lock. The key turned halfway and stopped. Mr. Whitmore, the deputy said, the order prohibits entry. Grant removed the key slowly. Through the window, he saw an empty parlor. The walnut piano had been moved to the foundation's storage wing. The wedding photograph was gone. In the upstairs nursery, pale light crossed bare floorboards where a crib had stood. No Eleanor. No suitcases. No quilt stitched with the name Hope Bennett. A sealed envelope waited inside a locked document box on the porch. It contained a certified deed, an inventory receipt, a copy of the court orders, and the Thanksgiving place card Eleanor had written for him. On the back were 10 words. You planned to borrow my future. I chose to protect it. Grant's company phone began vibrating. 11 missed calls from Keystone National Bank. 6 from the board of Whitmore Senior Living Communities. 1 from Vanessa Price, the company's executive vice president and Grant's companion in Chicago. Do they have the trustee transition packet? Grant called the bank. The general counsel answered instead of his loan officer. Mr. Whitmore, the proposed credit facility has been terminated. The institution has referred disputed documents for investigation and preserved all relevant communications. That farm was the collateral. The Bennett Preservation Trust disputed the authorization before closing. The bank never acquired a lien. You cannot terminate a committed facility over a domestic disagreement. This is not being treated as a domestic disagreement. The documents presented to the bank are alleged to contain forged signatures, false statements, and a trustee resolution that the issuing trust denies adopting. Communicate through counsel. The call ended. Grant stood beneath the porch roof while snow collected on the shoulders of his coat. For years, he had told investors that the Bennett farm represented stability, heritage, and family stewardship. He had never mentioned that none of it belonged to him. For weeks earlier, Thanksgiving morning had begun with the sound of the farm bell. Eleanor Grace Bennett Whitmore pulled the rope once, and the brass bell beside the kitchen door sent a clear note across the orchard. Her grandmother had used the bell to call field workers to lunch. Eleanor used it every Thanksgiving morning to announce that the turkey was in the oven and anyone arriving early would be put to work. At 41, Eleanor was 35 weeks pregnant after years of fertility treatment and 2 losses she rarely discussed outside her closest circle. She moved carefully around the long kitchen table while her aunt's cranberry relish chilled near the window and sage dressing waited in a cast-iron pan. 3 place settings stood in the dining room. 1 for Grant, 1 for Eleanor, and a small china saucer between them for the daughter due just after Christmas. Hope gets a plate, Eleanor told the movement beneath her ribs, but no pie until next year. Hope kicked once. The farmhouse had never been merely a residence. The Bennett family trust owned the farm, orchard, and surrounding acreage. Eleanor's father had established the trust after watching a cousin lose inherited land during a bitter divorce. The documents required independent review for major transfers and named Eleanor as acting trustee after her mother's death. Grant understood the structure before they married. He had his own attorney. Eleanor had hers. Their prenuptial agreement confirmed that the farm and trust interests remained separate. Grant also signed a waiver stating that he would not claim authority over trust property or obstruct a court-approved sale. At the time, he called the paperwork sensible. Later, he called the farm hours whenever investors were listening. Eleanor had helped Grant build Whitmore senior living communities from 3 facilities into a regional company. She reviewed acquisition targets, questioned occupancy projections, and insisted that resident deposits remain separate from development funds. When she identified overbilling at a construction site, Grant praised her judgment in private and accepted the credit in public. As the company grew, he began treating her caution as disloyalty. "You see risk everywhere," he told her. "That is why you asked me to review risk," she replied. "Not after every decision has already been made." Eventually, Eleanor stepped away from daily operations to care for her mother and pursue pregnancy. Grant transformed the change into a story about her fragility. He told directors that she had lost interest in business. He told friends that numbers made her anxious. At medical appointments, he answered questions before she could speak. The manipulation was rarely dramatic. It arrived through repetition. By the time Eleanor recognized it, other people had begun finishing Grant's sentences for him. The sound of a suitcase will cross the hallway. Grant entered the kitchen wearing a dark suit beneath a camel-colored coat. His company phone was in his hand. A second phone, the one he claimed was used only for travel security, rested near the coffee pot. "I need to fly to Chicago," he said. Eleanor looked at the suitcase. On Thanksgiving, the Keystone Committee moved the final loan review. "One of the participants wants additional assurances before Monday. You said the financing was already approved." "It is approved. This is relationship management." With an overnight bag, Vanessa scheduled meetings through tomorrow morning. Eleanor watched his face. "Vanessa is going? Half the executive team is going. On a holiday?" Grant's expression softened into concern. "You promised Dr. Patel you would not let stress become suspicion." Dr. Patel had never said that. He had advised Eleanor to rest when possible and call if she experienced regular contractions, bleeding, or decreased movement. Grant had turned medical caution into a character judgment. "I asked who was traveling," Eleanor said. "And I answered." He crossed the room, kissed her forehead, and placed a hand over her stomach. Hope shifted beneath his palm. "Everything I am doing is for her future." Grant lifted the suitcase and left. A hired car carried him down the farm road toward the airport. Eleanor returned to the kitchen and stood for a moment beside the untouched coffee. The second phone lit. A message appeared on the locked screen. "Vanessa Price. She still believes the farm stays in Hope's trust." Before the screen darkened, another notification arrived. "Vanessa Price. Did Dr. Vale sign the incapacity letter, or do we use the draft?" Eleanor did not pick up the device. The first message confirmed what she had tried not to believe about Vanessa. The second used her daughter's name and the word incapacity in the same sentence. Eleanor photographed the visible notifications and called Ruth Kaplan, the attorney who had represented the Bennett Trust for 20 years. Ruth answered over the sound of family voices. "Eleanor, happy Thanksgiving. I need you to go somewhere quiet." Ruth did not ask why. A door closed on her end. Eleanor read the messages exactly. "Do not unlock the phone," Ruth said. "Do not search his accounts. Set it down and tell me whether any trust documents arrived recently." A courier brought a portfolio yesterday. Grant said it was a duplicate loan book. Who was it addressed to? "The Bennett Preservation Trust, Attention, Eleanor Whitmore. You may open material addressed to you as trustee. Record the unopened package and every page in order. Do not mark or rearrange anything. The portfolio lay inside the farm office, a room Eleanor had used since college. She started a continuous video showing the door, desk, shipping label, and seal. Inside was a bank checklist for an $18 million revolving credit facility to Whitmore Senior Living Communities. The farm appeared as collateral. A cover memo stated that the Bennett Trust had approved the pledge through a unanimous trustee resolution. There was only one acting trustee, Eleanor. The resolution carried her signature. She had not signed it. Attached was a physician's letter from Dr. Malcolm Vale, a psychiatrist Eleanor had never met. The letter claimed she was experiencing pregnancy-related cognitive impairment and recommended that Grant serve as temporary co-trustee for financial decisions. A draft petition sought emergency appointment of Grant as trustee and guardian of Eleanor's property if she refused to cooperate after delivery. Ruth's voice became very calm. Continue recording. The next section was titled Trustee Transition After Hope. It contained a schedule for moving Eleanor to a private recovery residence, restricting her access to trust accounts, and filing a family court petition describing her as a danger to the baby. Vanessa was assigned to move into the farm's guest suite and oversee household continuity. The final pages listed proposed transfers from the loan proceeds. Only $6 million would go to company projects. The remainder would move through consulting and acquisition entities that did not appear in the board's approved plan. Eleanor sat down. The old farm office seemed to tilt around her. On one wall hung a photograph of her parents planting the north orchard. On another was a framed drawing Eleanor had made at age 9, showing the farmhouse with a crooked red roof and 2 mini windows. Grant had turned those acres into a line on a collateral schedule. He had turned her pregnancy into a legal strategy. He had turned Hope's birth into a deadline for taking control. Hope moved beneath Eleanor's ribs. I am still here, Eleanor whispered. Ruth heard her. Yes, you are. Now we proceed carefully. Secure the original trust agreement, your identification, the prenuptial agreement, and current medical records. Do not confront Grant. I am contacting local family counsel, trust litigation counsel, the bank's fraud office, and law enforcement. What about the phone? Leave it where it is until an investigator arrives. Knowing a passcode does not answer whether you are authorized to search the device. We will not build your safety on a questionable shortcut. Eleanor looked toward the dining room, where Grant's plate waited beneath the chandelier. He thinks I am saving him dinner. For the next few hours, Ruth said. Let him believe that. The first independent verification came from Eleanor's obstetrician. Dr. Patel confirmed that he had never questioned her capacity, referred her to Dr. Vale, or authorized Grant to manage her decisions. The clinic record placed Eleanor at an appointment in Pennsylvania on the same morning the forged trustee resolution claimed she appeared before a notary in Maryland. A state investigator arrived with a prosecutor's authorization to preserve the visible evidence and seized the phone while further legal process was sought. He photographed the lock screen, sealed the device in an evidence bag, and gave Eleanor a receipt. The courier package was collected separately with the original shipping materials. Keystone National Bank froze the loan file before the holiday ended. Its general counsel issued a preservation notice to the loan broker, Whitmore Senior Living Communities, and relevant employees. The bank did not declare Grant guilty. It stopped the transaction and began checking the documents. Ruth arranged for a forensic accountant, Samuel Ortiz, to review materials the trust and Eleanor lawfully possessed. Samuel had spent 25 years examining healthcare and real estate companies. He disliked dramatic adjectives and trusted reconciliations. By Saturday, he identified a serious liquidity crisis. Several new senior living projects had lower occupancy than Grant reported. Construction costs had been shifted among entities. Vendor payments flowed to a consulting business linked to Vanessa's cousin. Resident operations remained stable, but the development subsidiaries faced a shortage exceeding $30 million. The loan would buy time, Samuel said. It would not solve the problem, and the collateral documents could make the trust appear responsible. Eleanor looked out at the orchard. How long before they expected funding? Monday afternoon. The emergency family court hearing occurred Friday morning. Trust counsel filed separately for an order preventing anyone from using the disputed resolution or representing Grant as trustee. The judges reviewed sworn statements, the documents, the visible messages, and the medical record contradicting the notarial date. Neither court issued a final decision on guilt. The family judge entered a temporary protection order, prohibited direct contact, and granted Eleanor exclusive possession of the farm. The trust judge suspended any disputed trustee appointment, confirmed Eleanor's authority to protect trust assets, and required notice before any extraordinary transaction. Grant participated through attorneys from Chicago. His lawyers called the documents preliminary estate planning. They argued that the medical letter was a draft prepared out of concern and that Eleanor was overreacting after discovering an affair. The judges set further hearings. Temporary orders created boundaries, not verdicts. A licensed security firm preserved camera footage from the office and front entrance. Eleanor wrote a detailed timeline while events were fresh. She changed access codes on trust accounts with the bank's approval, placed fraud alerts on her credit records, and added a second independent reviewer for large transactions. She did not empty joint marital accounts or transfer disputed property to herself. Grant's personal belongings were inventoried by a bonded company. His clothes, art, business records, wine collection, and separate furniture went to climate-controlled storage. His attorneys received photographs and retrieval procedures. Jointly disputed items remained in place or were held by agreement. Eleanor removed only personal documents, maternity clothes, family photographs clearly belonging to her, and the handmade quilt stitched with Hope Bennett. She filmed each room before anything moved. Grant will say you stole his life, Ruth warned. He has said that about every boundary I ever set. Then we let the inventory answer. The question of selling the farm was more complicated than escaping it. Her father had created the Bennett Preservation Trust to prevent impulsive transfers. A sale required an independent appraisal, review by a trust protector, and confirmation that the transaction served the trust's stated purposes. Eleanor could not simply sign away the farm because she was frightened. Years earlier, Heritage Path Foundation had offered to purchase the property and convert it into a regional resource center. The plan included temporary apartments, financial counseling offices, a childcare room, and training for older adults recovering from fraud or coercive control. Eleanor's mother supported the idea, but postponed it while she was alive. The foundation's offer remained open subject to updated diligence. Eleanor met separately with independent trust counsel and the trust protector, retired Judge Helen Brooks. They reviewed every alternative. The trust could retain the farm and litigate. It could lease part of the property. It could wait until after Hope's birth. It could reject Heritage Path and invite other bids. Judge Brooks asked the hardest question. Are you selling because Grant made the farm unbearable, or because the sale is right for the trust? Eleanor considered it for a long time. Both can be true, she said. But the second reason must stand without the first. She explained that the orchard required capital the trust did not want to spend. The farmhouse needed accessibility renovations, and the foundation's plan matched her parents' charitable goals. An updated appraisal later showed the offer at fair market value. The foundation provided verified funds, a development budget, and enforceable commitments concerning the property's use. Judge Brooks recommended approval, subject to final title review and the trust court's consent. The process took nearly 4 weeks. During that time, Eleanor lived in a furnished cottage owned by her cousin outside Lancaster. Her location was known to counsel, doctors, and the court, but withheld from unnecessary public filings where allowed. She attended every hearing. She responded to lawful discovery. She did not vanish from the legal system. She vanished only from Grant's private reach. Life in the cottage was quiet enough to be uncomfortable. Eleanor woke before dawn expecting the farm alarm to announce a car. She checked the windows when unfamiliar vehicles slowed outside. Legal emails made her heart race even when they contained routine scheduling. A therapist helped her understand that fear did not prove incapacity. It showed that her body had learned to anticipate control. Eleanor began recovering through ordinary choices. She selected Hope's pediatrician. She opened a new account for her separate income while leaving joint funds undisturbed. She bought a simple crib and assembled the drawer backward. Instead of hearing Grant's voice call the mistake evidence, she called Ruth, who arrived with a screwdriver and 2 sandwiches. Competence, Ruth said, is not the absence of wrong screws. Eleanor laughed for the first time since Thanksgiving. Meanwhile, Vanessa hired independent counsel. She had believed Grant would divorce Eleanor after securing the loan. Then her attorney found draft termination papers naming Vanessa as the employee responsible for the trustee packet. Grant planned to move funds through a company she did not control, fire her, and tell investigators she had acted from jealousy. Vanessa contacted prosecutors. The forensic examination of Grant's second phone occurred after a warrant authorized the search. Investigators created a verified forensic copy and maintained a record of every person who handled the device. The phone contained messages about the false capacity letter, photos of Eleanor's signature samples, and recordings Vanessa had made during meetings with Grant. One recording captured him saying, "Once hope is born, Eleanor will be exhausted. If she objects, the petition and doctor's letter will make her look irrational." Another described the farm as temporary collateral we can control before she understands what happened. The bank's investigation found that the notarized trustee resolution had been submitted through the company's loan broker using identity documents taken from a trust file. Dr. Vail denied examining Eleanor and claimed his electronic signature had been placed on a draft without authorization. Investigators continued evaluating his role rather than accepting the denial at face value. The farm sale also required Eleanor to separate memory from ownership. She had learned to drive an old pickup along the orchard lanes before she was tall enough to see clearly over the steering wheel. Her father taught her to balance the trust ledger at the same desk where she found Grant's package. Her mother spent her last summer beneath the pear trees, insisting that no family should confuse keeping land with keeping love. During one of their final conversations, Eleanor had asked whether selling the farm would betray the Bennett name. Her mother shook her head. "A name is not a padlock. Your grandparents kept this place because it served the family. If another purpose serves people better, let the purpose change." Eleanor remembered those words during the independent council meeting. She did not want fear to make the decision, but she also refused to let nostalgia become another person controlling her from the past. Before approving the transaction, Judge Brooks required Heritage Path to accept enforceable use restrictions for a defined period, maintain the orchard, and preserve public access to the family cemetery at the northern boundary. The foundation agreed. If it abandoned the charitable plan, specified remedies would protect the trust's interests. Eleanor also negotiated a small archive room for Bennett family records. The photographs, farm journals, and oral histories would be cataloged rather than displayed as decoration. Residents could understand that the property had changed purposes without pretending it had appeared from nowhere. These details slowed the closing, but they made the decision durable. Grant had always confused speed with strength. Eleanor discovered that a careful agreement could protect more than a dramatic promise. The trust court approved the sale after reviewing the appraisal, foundation commitments, Eleanor's independent counsel, and Judge Brooks's recommendation. Title counsel confirmed the trust's authority and required certified copies of all relevant orders. Closing occurred through escrow. The proceeds moved into diversified trust investments for Eleanor and Hope, subject to the trust restrictions. On closing afternoon, Eleanor returned to the farm with Ruth, a deputy, and the property attorney. She walked through the kitchen one final time. The Thanksgiving bell hung beside the door. Her great-grandmother had purchased it from a closed schoolhouse in 1938. The trust inventory listed it as a removable family object rather than a fixture. Heritage Path agreed that Eleanor could keep it. She touched the worn rope. For decades, the bell had called people home. Eleanor realized home could no longer mean the place where Grant expected her to wait. She rang it once. The sound traveled over the winter orchard. Then she removed the bell under the inventory supervisor's direction, wrapped it in a quilted blanket, and carried it to the car. Grant's key, the certified deed, the storage receipt, and his Thanksgiving place card went into the locked document box on the porch. The second phone remained in evidence. Eleanor drove away before the new Bennett house sign was installed. Grant returned from Chicago the following afternoon and discovered the recorded deed, the court orders, and the closed bank facility. He called Vanessa from the road. "Delete your messages," he said. The police copied the phone. "You need to tell them the trustee packet was your idea." A silence followed. "You already wrote that story," Vanessa said. You just forgot to make it true. She ended the call. The corporate crisis reached its peak not in a dramatic courtroom, but inside Keystone National Bank's credit conference center. Grant arrived expecting to persuade the bank to restore the loan. Instead, the bank's general counsel, outside auditors, Whitmore's independent directors, and lawyers for the company were present. The bank explained that it would not proceed while the collateral authorization remained disputed and the proposed use of funds conflicted with prior representations. No one at the table declared Grant guilty. The bank exercised its contractual rights and protected itself. Whitmore's board then convened a separate emergency session. Grant called the documents misunderstood contingency planning. He described Eleanor as traumatized by pregnancy loss and unable to separate personal betrayal from business judgment. He accused Vanessa of altering records to protect herself. The chairman listened until Grant finished. Then a screen illuminated at the end of the room. Eleanor appeared from Ruth's office. She was 39 weeks pregnant. The old farm bell rested on a shelf behind her. Grant leaned toward the camera. "Ellie, come home. Hope deserves both parents working together." Eleanor's face remained still. "Do not use our daughter as a sentence ending," she said. Outside counsel presented the preliminary corporate findings. Loan documents used a trustee resolution the trust denied approving. The capacity letter was unsupported. Development funds had been routed through entities the board had not authorized. Occupancy and construction reports contained material discrepancies requiring investigation. Vanessa entered with her attorney. She did not perform remorse for the room. "I participated in conduct that harmed Eleanor," she said. "I am cooperating because it was wrong and because Grant intended to blame me." Both statements are true. Her attorney confirmed that specified recordings and records had been provided through controlled legal channels. The directors heard Grant discuss replacing Eleanor as trustee, using the farm as collateral, and leaving Vanessa responsible for the paperwork. They also heard him dismiss concerns about residents and employees. "The operating facilities generate enough cash," he said on one recording. "Payroll will catch up after the acquisition closes." The oldest director pushed his chair back. "You risked employees and residents without telling this board." Grant pointed toward the screen. "She is destroying the company." Eleanor answered quietly. "I prevented you from borrowing against property you did not control. The company's condition is the result of its records, not my refusal to sign a lie." The board placed Grant on administrative leave. His credentials, banking authority, and access to resident funds were suspended. A special committee assumed control, preserved servers, and engaged restructuring advisors. Emergency arrangements protected payroll, resident services, medications, and food contracts while development projects were reviewed. Eleanor asked the directors not to treat every manager as a conspirator. People who followed ordinary procedures should not lose their careers because they worked near him, she said. "Examine conduct. Do not punish proximity." The board agreed. No one applauded when Grant left the room with security. The company had not delivered justice. It had stopped ongoing risk and turned the evidence over to institutions authorized to decide more. Eleanor's labor began 9 days later, at home in the cottage, while Ruth was helping hang the old farm bell beside the back door. The first contraction felt like pressure. The second made Eleanor grip the kitchen counter. Ruth looked at the clock. "Should I call the hospital?" Eleanor breathed through the tightening. "Call them. Then take the bell down before you use it to announce anything." Ruth laughed and reached for the phone. At the hospital, staff followed Eleanor's choices concerning visitors to her room, subject to clinical and safety needs. Grant's attorney received notice through the agreed legal process. The family court entered a temporary parenting order providing supervised contact while evaluators reviewed the allegations, the criminal case, and Hope's best interests. Hope Grace Bennett was born healthy at 5:08 the next morning. Her cry filled the room before Eleanor saw her face. When the nurse placed Hope against her chest, Eleanor touched the dark hair along her daughter's head and felt the world become both smaller and larger. "You are not an asset," she whispered. "You are not leverage. You are hope." The investigations continued for many months. Federal prosecutors eventually filed charges alleging bank fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy, identity-related offenses, and false statements intended to influence a financial institution. Grant pleaded not guilty. Some evidence was challenged. The court heard those arguments. After several motions were resolved and cooperating witnesses agreed to testify, Grant entered a negotiated plea to multiple counts. A federal judge imposed the sentence. Vanessa pleaded guilty to a lesser offense and received a reduced sentencing recommendation for substantial assistance. Dr. Vale faced separate professional and legal proceedings based on evidence concerning the false letter. The story did not declare outcomes the courts had not reached. Whitmore senior living communities survived under independent management. Development projects were sold or restructured. Resident operations continued. The board established stronger controls over related party transactions and protected resident funds from development risk. The company removed Grant's name from its public branding. The divorce and custody proceedings remained separate from the criminal case. Evaluators considered both parents, the documented conduct, and Hope's needs. Grant did not automatically lose every parental right because he faced criminal charges. Eleanor did not receive unlimited authority simply because she had been harmed. A structured parenting plan developed through court orders and professional supervision. The process was slow and imperfect. Eleanor respected that slowness more than she once would have. Grant had always treated speed as proof of power. The courts required notice, evidence, response, and review. Delay was painful, but it was different from control. 6 months later, Eleanor returned to consulting on financial governance for care organizations. She worked from a small brick office and spent afternoons with Hope in the cottage garden. The Bennett Trust purchased the cottage and surrounding acreage as a modest residence permitted under its terms. The old farm bell hung beside the back door. Her new home had no ballroom, no investor dining room, and no stone entrance announcing a family name. It had a narrow kitchen, uneven floors, and a view of maple trees. Every key belonged to Eleanor. Heritage Path opened Bennett House the following autumn. The farmhouse bedrooms became transitional apartments. The farm office became a legal and financial counseling suite. The barn hosted workshops on fraud prevention, caregiving contracts, estate planning, and rebuilding credit after coercive control. One program served older adults whose relatives had pressured them to sign property or loan documents. The orchard remained. Residents harvested apples together and sold cider at a community market. The proceeds supported childcare and transportation for families using the center. On the second Thanksgiving after Grant forgot his phone, Eleanor visited Bennett House with Hope. The long dining table held residents ranging from young mothers to a 72-year-old widow learning to manage accounts her husband had controlled for 50 years. No one asked Eleanor to give a speech. She preferred it that way. After lunch, she carried Hope through the old kitchen and showed her the place where the bell had hung. "That used to call our family home," Eleanor said, although Hope was too young to understand. That evening, back at the cottage, Ruth joined them for turkey sandwiches and pie. Eleanor opened the back door and pulled the bell rope once. The sound moved across the maple trees. Hope laughed from her high chair and struck both hands against the tray. 2 adult plates and 1 small plate rested on the table. No place was held for Grant. No empty chair waited for an apology. Eleanor had not become fearless. Unknown cars still made her look twice. Legal envelopes still tightened her chest. Some nights, she remembered the forged letter and wondered how close Grant had come to making institutions doubt her before they heard her speak. But fear no longer functioned as his evidence. It became information she could notice, examine, and survive. Grant believed the farm was lost when the deed recorded. He believed the loan was lost when the bank froze the file. He believed his company was lost when the board removed his access. He was wrong about the order. He lost Eleanor much earlier, in the quiet years when he mistook patience for permission and love for authority. The phone did not create his betrayal. It merely allowed the first visible message to escape the story he controlled. Eleanor's victory was not the sale, the board vote, or even the court case. It was the moment she understood that caution was not weakness, fear was not incapacity, and a family legacy did not require preserving a building at the cost of the people inside it. The old bell rang once across the darkening yard. This time, it did not call Eleanor back to the past. It announced that she was already home. In time, Eleanor stopped measuring recovery by whether Grant's name still made her afraid. She measured it by smaller things: sleeping through the night, opening a bank statement without bracing for a surprise, letting Hope play on the kitchen floor, while dinner burned slightly in the oven. She learned that a peaceful life did not always look impressive from the road. Sometimes it looked like an ordinary cottage, a trustworthy friend at the table, and a child growing up without being taught that love requires surrendering the right to understand what is being done in her name. That was the inheritance Eleanor finally chose to preserve. Not the acreage, not the sign, but the freedom to question, decide, and remain fully herself, without permission again. Hope would inherit that example long before she understood the documents that had once threatened to define her future.